In the heart of the jungle, there are secrets. Some are as old as time itself, carved in stone and hidden beneath layers of decaying leaves. But there are other secrets. Modern secrets, man-made. Gilded lies, coated in gold. This is the story of the greatest golden lie in history. A story of a dream that turned ordinary people into millionaires, deceived the sharpest minds in the world of finance, and ended in a tragic fall in the dark depths of the Borneo jungle. This is the story of Bre-X. To understand the scale of what happened, we must travel back in time to the mid-1990s. The world was a frenzied place, dancing to the rhythm of the dot-com bubble. Money flowed like rivers, and investors were desperately searching for the next big thing, for the stock that would turn a few dollars into a fortune. The financial markets were living in a state of blind optimism, a genuine fever that made it possible to believe in anything, as long as it promised a quick fortune. And in this climate, charged with hope and greed, a small obscure Canadian company, operating from a humble basement in Calgary, appeared on the scene. Its name was Bre-X Minerals. Bre-X was just a penny stock, as they are known, that barely anyone had heard of. It was run by a man named David Walsh, a stock promoter with a checkered history, who possessed a talent for selling dreams. But the dream he was selling this time was bigger than anything that had come before. He had a partner on the other side of the world, a mysterious man working in silence, a Filipino geologist named Michael de Guzman. De Guzman was the man on the ground, the expert who went to one of the most primitive and brutal places on Earth, the jungles of Borneo in Indonesia, in search of gold. In 1995, the news began to leak out slowly. Astonishing news. Bre-X announced that de Guzman's team had found significant gold deposits at their site in Busing. At first, it was just whispers in the trading rooms, but with each new announcement, the whispers turned into roars. The numbers the company was announcing were fantastical. 2 million ounces, then 10 million, then 30 million ounces. The estimates swelled on a monthly basis, each new number surpassing the last in an unbelievable way. Major financial institutions began to take notice, and analysts started describing the Busing mine as the richest gold discovery of the century. Imagine the scene. A gold rush swept the globe. Bre-X was no longer a small company. It had become a global phenomenon. Its stock price, which had been measured in pennies, exploded in a legendary fashion, surpassing the $200 per share mark. The company's market value jumped from almost nothing to over $6 billion. Investors poured in from every corner, from huge pension funds in New York to small individual investors everywhere. Everyone wanted a piece of this golden mountain. But the biggest impact was in its hometown of Calgary. Suddenly, the quiet town was transformed into a city of the newly rich. Nurses, mechanics, and teachers who had invested a few $1,000s in their neighbor's obscure company suddenly found themselves millionaires on paper. The newspapers wrote about the Bre-X miracle. It was a corporate Cinderella story, the American dream or the Canadian dream, in this case realized in its most splendid form. It was the greatest gold discovery in human history, a story too good to be true. And in the dark heart of the jungle, a secret was festering, a secret that was about to bring this golden edifice crashing down and turn it to ash. In the world of high finance, a story as miraculous as Bre-X doesn't just attract investors, it attracts predators. The titans of the mining industry, the established giants who had spent decades and billions mapping the globe, could not ignore the upstart company that had supposedly found the river of gold they had all missed. A deal was inevitable. It seemed like the ultimate validation, the moment the scrappy underdog from Calgary would be crowned king. Powerful suitors came calling, but one emerged as the most serious: Freeport-McMoRan, a massive and respected American mining corporation. They wanted to partner with Bre-X to bring their industrial might and expertise to help build the largest gold mine on Earth. The deal was valued in the billions. It was the final step in Bre-X's ascent from a basement dream to a global powerhouse. But it came with one non-negotiable condition: due diligence. Due diligence. It is the cold, sober process of verification. Before any deal is signed, before billions of dollars change hands, the buyer has the right to check the seller's books, to inspect their assets, and in the case of a gold mine, to drill their own holes and test their own samples. It is the moment where myth must become math. And so, a team of seasoned, skeptical geologists from Freeport-McMoRan was dispatched to the heart of Borneo, to the remote jungle camp at Busing, to verify the miracle. They were the first true investigators in this story, and their arrival marked the beginning of the end. Imagine the scene at that remote jungle camp. The oppressive humidity, the constant drone of insects, the thick, muddy ground. This was Michael de Guzman's kingdom, and he did not welcome visitors. When the Freeport team arrived, they were met not with open collaboration, but with a wall of resistance and suspicion. The atmosphere was tense, paranoid. De Guzman and his team on the ground controlled everything. Every request from the independent geologists was met with excuses and delays. The weather was suddenly too poor for drilling. The necessary equipment was mysteriously broken. Logistical support from the nearby villages was unavailable. The Freeport team's primary goal was simple. They wanted to drill their own core samples from holes drilled right next to Bre-X's original discovery sites, a process known as twinning. This would provide an independent, verifiable sample of the rock. But de Guzman stubbornly refused. He insisted they could only analyze samples from his cores, the very cores that the entire multi-billion-dollar valuation was based on. To the Freeport geologists, this was a red flag the size of a mountain. It was like a car salesman insisting you can't test drive the car, but you can look at the shiny pictures he took of it. The resistance was so fierce, the excuses so transparent, that the Freeport team knew something was deeply wrong. The busing camp didn't feel like a geological research site. It felt like a fortress, desperately guarding a secret. After weeks of tense negotiations and mounting pressure from corporate headquarters, de Guzman finally, reluctantly, agreed to let the Freeport team drill a single confirmation hole. The spot was chosen, right beside one of the original holes that had produced some of the richest gold samples ever recorded. The drill rig was fired up, its diesel engine roaring to life, breaking the jungle's silence. For days, it bored its way deep into the earth, churning through hundreds of meters of volcanic rock. The Freeport geologists watched the process like hawks, ensuring every inch of the new core sample was secured, documented, and sealed, free from any possible contamination or tampering. This single cylinder of rock was their only piece of clean evidence. Finally, the sample was extracted, packed in sealed containers, and flown out of the jungle under heavy security. It was sent to an independent, highly respected laboratory thousands of miles away. The fate of the entire deal, the truth behind the Bre-X miracle, and the billions of dollars hanging in the balance, all now rested on the analysis of this one piece of stone. The world held its breath. What secrets were locked inside that rock? Was it the key to the richest treasure on Earth, or the final thread that, when pulled, would unravel the greatest lie the financial world had ever seen? The days that followed felt like an eternity. While the single, verified core sample was being meticulously analyzed in a sterile lab far from the jungle's humidity, the financial world was in a state of suspended animation. The Bre-X stock, once an unstoppable rocket, began to sputter. Rumors swirled like smoke through trading floors and online message boards. Some whispered of a massive government seizure by the corrupt Indonesian regime. Others spoke of a legendary discovery even greater than imagined. The pressure was unbearable, and it was all converging on one man, Michael de Guzman. He was the maestro, the geologist who had read the secrets of the earth. Now, he was being summoned from his remote kingdom in busing to the corporate boardrooms of Jakarta to meet with the Freeport McMoran executives. The fate of the $6 billion deal rested on his word, on his ability to explain the discrepancies and calm the rising tide of doubt. On March 19, 1997, Michael de Guzman boarded a helicopter for the first leg of his journey to the meeting that would decide everything. The chopper lifted off from the busing site, rising above the thick, green canopy of the Borneo jungle. Below him was a landscape that had remained unchanged for millennia, a vast, unforgiving labyrinth of rivers and trees. He was the only passenger in the back. The flight was supposed to be short, a routine hop to a larger town. But it would be his last. Midway through the flight, the pilot heard a noise from the cabin behind him. He glanced back just in time to see an empty space where his passenger had been. The helicopter door was open, swinging in the wind. Michael de Guzman was gone. He had vanished into the green abyss below. The news of his disappearance was an explosion. The financial world reeled in shock and confusion. At first, it was treated as a tragic accident. But as the hours turned into days, a darker narrative took hold. This was not an accident. This was suicide. The man who held the key to the entire Bre-X empire had jumped to his death, taking the secret of busing with him to a jungle grave. For the investors, for the executives at Freeport, this was the ultimate dead end. The one person who could provide the answers was gone. The entire deal collapsed under the weight of the uncertainty. The Bre-X stock plummeted in a wave of panic selling. The dream was turning into a nightmare. And it was in the midst of this chaos, as search parties scoured the jungle floor for de Guzman's body, that the breakthrough finally came. The lab report, the analysis of that single, clean core sample drilled by the Freeport team, was delivered. Imagine the scene: a quiet room, far from the jungle's heat and the market's noise. A group of executives opens a simple envelope. Inside is a multi-page report filled with geological data, spectral analysis, and chemical breakdowns. But they only needed to read one line in the conclusion. The report was definitive. The rock core drilled right next to Bre-X's richest discovery hole contained no gold. Not in trace amounts, not in commercially viable quantities. It contained nothing. The $6 billion mountain of gold did not exist. The truth, when it was finally revealed, was as crude as it was brilliant. It was one of the oldest tricks in the mining playbook: salting. For years, Michael de Guzman had been committing a meticulous, painstaking fraud. He would take the worthless core samples drilled from the bussing rock, and in the privacy of his hut, he would add gold to them. Not gold from the mine, but gold from other sources. He filed down his own gold wedding ring, mixing the shavings with the crushed rock. He bought gold panned by local villagers from nearby rivers. He would sprinkle this foreign gold into the sample bags before they were sealed and sent for analysis. It was a simple, manual deception that fooled the entire world. The greatest gold discovery in history was a lie, orchestrated by one man with a file and a handful of gold dust. The architect of the fraud was now dead, his body eventually found in the jungle, ravaged by animals. The mountain of gold had vanished into thin air. Now, the only thing left was the reckoning. How would the world react when it learned that the greatest discovery in history was, in fact, the greatest fraud? When the news of the lab report finally broke, the reaction was not a slow decline. It was an apocalypse. The confrontation in this story was not in a courtroom or an interrogation room, but on the trading floors of the world's stock exchanges. On Monday, March 27, 1997, the Toronto Stock Exchange halted trading of Bre-X stock to prevent a complete meltdown, but it was only a temporary reprieve. When the stock was finally delisted from the Nasdaq and trading resumed on other exchanges, the result was a financial massacre. The $6 billion company, the darling of the investment world, became a black hole. Its stock price plunged from hundreds of dollars to pennies in a matter of minutes, before becoming completely and irrevocably worthless. It was a supernova of greed collapsing in on itself, wiping out a fortune greater than the GDP of many small nations in the blink of an eye. The true victims, however, were not the Bay Street bankers or the Wall Street hedge funds. They were the ordinary people, the nurses, teachers, and mechanics in Calgary who had watched their modest investments turn them into paper millionaires. Now, they logged into their brokerage accounts to find nothing but zeros. Their life savings, their retirement funds, their children's college educations, all of it had vanished. The shock gave way to denial, then to a deep, agonizing despair. The Bre-X miracle had drowned thousands of families in a sea of debt and broken dreams. The golden fairy tale had become a brutal lesson in the anatomy of a lie. In the aftermath, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police launched one of the largest corporate fraud investigations in Canadian history. But they were chasing ghosts. The architect of the lie, Michael de Guzman, was dead, and even his death remained a source of haunting questions. While the official cause was ruled a suicide, many found it too convenient. Had he jumped? Or had he been pushed? Was he silenced by powerful partners who feared he would expose them? The fact that his body was found mostly decomposed and had supposedly been identified by a local dentist from dental records that later went missing only fueled the conspiracy theories. The jungle kept its secrets. And what of the men at the top? David Walsh, the CEO who sold the dream from his basement, vehemently denied any knowledge of the fraud. He claimed he was the biggest victim of all, a man betrayed by his trusted geologist. He moved to the Bahamas and in 1998, just over a year after the collapse, he died of a brain aneurysm at the age of 52, before any criminal charges could be brought against him in Canada. That left one man to face the music: John Felderhoff, the company's vice president of exploration. He was the only person ever charged in connection with the scandal, facing allegations of illegal insider trading. His legal battle was long and arduous, spanning nearly a decade. And in 2007, the final, bitter twist in the story was delivered. John Felderhoff was found not guilty. The judge ruled that while there were many red flags, there was not enough evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he knew the gold was a fraud. And with that, the case was closed. No one was ever criminally convicted. No one went to jail. The billions of dollars were lost forever. The legacy of Bre-X is a scar on the face of the financial world. It stands as the single greatest mining fraud in history, a textbook case study of mass hysteria and the perilous allure of a story that is simply too good to be true. In its wake, Canada and other countries enacted strict new regulations for geological reporting, a set of rules known as National Instrument for 3101, designed to ensure that a fraud of this magnitude could never happen again. But for the thousands of people who lost everything, these changes came too late. The Bre-X saga remains a chilling cautionary tale. It is a story about the intoxicating power of greed, the fragility of belief, and the devastating consequences of a lie gilded in gold. It is a true crime story with the most unsettling ending of all, a crime without punishment, and a pursuit of justice that found nothing.